China's government has reportedly told its airlines to stop accepting new Boeing jet deliveries and to freeze purchases of Boeing 787 parts. This pause could cost Boeing an extra $40 million per aircraft just to keep its supply chain from breaking down. Experts in aerospace and aviation warn that U.S. tariffs could now be making flights less safe by driving up costs even further, not just for Boeing, but for Airbus too. Boeing, long considered a symbol of American aerospace, just made a dramatic move that has rattled both Washington and Wall Street. This isn't just downsizing or hitting pause on a plant, it's a full exit. Boeing isn't walking away from one facility. It's pulling key parts of jet production out of the U.S. entirely. The reason? Well, it's not just about lowering costs. It's about dodging harmful policies. Trade restrictions that started under the Trump administration, which were meant to protect American jobs, are now hurting U.S. companies like Boeing. Materials are harder to get, global supply chains are jammed, and major international buyers are turning their backs, especially after China, the European Union, and Canada retaliated with their own tariffs. Caught in the middle, Boeing is now shifting operations to places like Canada, Germany, and Malaysia, nations with stable trade policies and fewer political risks. This move isn't just one company reacting, it's a loud warning bell. If Boeing, a top defense contractor and NASA supplier, can't function under American trade policy, then honestly, who can? Let's break it down. On April 15, 2025, China told its top airlines, China Southern, China Eastern, and Air China, to stop all Boeing orders and halt purchases of U.S. aircraft parts. The exact number of jets affected isn't clear, but analysts estimate dozens are now stuck in limbo, and Boeing is scrambling to find other buyers. This is more than just a few lost sales. It's an ejection from one of Boeing's most important markets. The blow is especially sharp because China was set to become Boeing's biggest customer. Back in the US, Boeing was already feeling the heat from soaring costs. By 2025, prices for core materials like aluminum and specialized steel had risen by as much as 40%. Much of that spike came from tariffs imposed in 2018 and raised again in 2025, hitting materials like high-grade titanium and advanced avionics, many of which are imported from Europe or Asia. While Airbus benefited from steady European Union trade deals, Boeing's costs ballooned. But Boeing couldn't simply raise prices without losing deals to competitors. Absorbing the costs, though, cut into profits, especially painful after the 737 MAX crisis. By May 2025, the strain inside Boeing was, well, really boiling over. Production delays mounted, layoffs loomed in Everett and North Charleston. Then, in early June, Boeing made it official United States-based assembly lines were being paused indefinitely. As trade tensions got worse, Boeing funneled new investments into Canada and Malaysia, countries with more predictable policies. The company decided it was less risky than riding out America's policy whiplash. The consequences? Nearly 40,000 United States jobs tied to Boeing's domestic manufacturing are now in danger. And it's not just engineers or factory workers. It's truck drivers, supply vendors, caterers, and honestly, countless small businesses built around Boeing. For towns in Washington State and South Carolina, this is an economic storm. What began as a plan to hit back at China has ended up hurting America's top aerospace firm. Boeing isn't just cutting costs. It's reacting to hard numbers and difficult choices. This raises the bigger question. Do tariffs really protect United States industries, or are they pushing them out? Let's look closer. Boeing's struggle isn't just about tariffs. It's about a global system that's become impossible to untangle. The idea of making everything in America sounds patriotic, but even a single jetliner depends on a worldwide network. Titanium is a great example. Boeing used to rely on Russia's VSMPO Avisma for aerospace-grade titanium. They even had a joint venture. But after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, sanctions broke that supply chain. Now, Boeing is scrambling to find pricier and less reliable sources. Aviation consulting firms like AISO say these disruptions have already slowed down jet production and raised costs. and titanium is just one piece of the puzzle. Major systems, like flight computers and cockpit electronics, are sourced from partners in France and Germany, such as Thales and Lear. These aren't off-the-shelf components. They're precision-engineered, tightly regulated, and take years to certify. Replacing them with U.S. alternatives isn't simple. It would mean redesigning production processes from scratch. And it's not just avionics. Large parts of the 737 come from outside the U.S., like vertical fins made in China and India. This isn't about cutting corners. It's how planes are built today. So when Trump-era tariffs jumped again in 2025, especially the crushing 145% tariff on Chinese imports, it wasn't just China taking the hit. Boeing was caught in the crossfire. Supplies dried up. Costs surged. Trade partners retaliated. By mid-2025, Boeing was on the edge. Material costs had risen 40% since 2021. Orders from China were frozen, and the company faced a deadly combination: rising costs, shrinking demand, and production delays. At that point, Boeing had only two options: either bleed cash until the business collapsed or shift operations abroad. The company began leaning into investments in countries with better trade terms and strong talent, like Malaysia and Canada. Germany, with its high-tech aerospace industry, is another likely partner. This isn't about cheap labor. It's about staying afloat in a world where aircraft parts come from 10 or more countries. America simply can't manufacture a whole jet domestically, not without years of investment in sweeping reforms. That's why Boeing's move away from United States soil is so alarming. It marks a point where trade policy clashed with economic reality. It's a warning about what happens when global supply chains meet rigid trade barriers. Because the truth is, Boeing didn't abandon America. America's policies pushed Boeing out, and the fallout is already spreading. In late 2024, Boeing announced a global workforce reduction of 10%. By January 17, 2025, more than 1,160 employees were let go at the Everett, Washington facility. Another 220 were cut in North Charleston, home of the Dreamliner. But this isn't just about Boeing staff. Truckers, janitors, catering crews, logistics workers, everyone tied to Boeing's massive network is feeling the pressure. In cities like St. Louis and Kansas City, small suppliers are already losing contracts and laying off teams. Many aren't sure they'll survive the summer. Even support companies, maintenance crews, airport services, food vendors are at risk. Boeing was their primary customer. Without that income, they're not just losing profits, they're facing collapse. Then there's the intellectual loss. Boeing has long worked with top U.S. universities, MIT, Purdue, Georgia Tech, and the University of Washington, to push innovation and grow future talent. But that, too, is starting to change. In March 2025, Boeing announced a major new research partnership with Queen's University Belfast in Northern Ireland. The deal, worth millions, focuses on cutting-edge aerospace materials and sustainable aviation technology. It's a strong vote of confidence in UK academics, but it also shows Boeing is shifting its innovation efforts offshore. Why? Because in places like the UK, Germany, and Canada, trade rules don't shift overnight. Policies stay consistent. Workers have world-class training, and government funding supports high-tech industries instead of scaring them off. Meanwhile, back in the U.S., Boeing's domestic plans are under pressure, from sudden tariffs to delays in export permits and rising political risk. Boeing is no longer just losing customers in China and Europe, it's watching those customers turn into rivals. After China froze new Boeing orders in April 2025, the financial damage was clear. Tariff penalties stacked up, and Boeing missed out on key deals. Airbus, on the other hand, pulled ahead, supported by reliable European trade agreements. This is how industrial giants fade, not in one blow but through repeated cuts. First the layoffs, then the lost contracts, and then the talent drain. Boeing's production pause is no longer just a bump in the road. It's a warning flare. On November 10, 2024, Boeing told investors it would cut 17,000 jobs, about 10% of its total staff. The hardest-hit sites included Everett, where over 1,000 workers lost their jobs last winter, plus plants in St. Louis and North Charleston, which now face deeper cuts. Dreamliner communities are seeing paychecks vanish and home values drop. Boeing's small suppliers are hurting too. With orders for parts like wing spars canceled, many small shops are shutting down. Skilled engineers are leaving for good. Boeing's legendary partnerships with schools like MIT and Purdue are now taking a backseat to new labs in Belfast and Montreal, where, money flows faster and policies stay steady. The message to America's tech workers is clear: the aerospace future may lift off elsewhere. And it all began with trade measures sold as protection. The very tariffs meant to defend American manufacturing ended up raising costs and triggering global blowback. Now Boeing still builds planes, just not in the United States. If a century-old leader like Boeing can't navigate modern trade politics, how can smaller firms survive? This shift isn't just about profit margins, it's about America's fading industrial power. One lost contract, one job cut at a time. The bigger question now, can any industry survive the protection it's being given? Boeing is already betting on a global strategy. On May 28, 2025, Canada took the lead. Boeing committed 17.5 million Canadian dollars, about 12.8 million US dollars, to two sustainable aviation fuel projects in British Columbia and Quebec. Ottawa offered simple, strong incentives, stable trade, big research tax credits, and a guaranteed military order for the PE-8A Poseidon. Boeing called it an ITB investment, but industry insiders say it's more a foothold for future production. Germany followed. In May 2024, Boeing expanded its parts center in North Rhine-Westphalia, its third in the country. Faster access for EU customers, zero tariff surprises. Berlin sweetened the deal with export support and access to Europe's deep talent pool. For Boeing, the logic is easy. Faster parts, no trade headaches. In Southeast Asia, Kuala Lumpur made its move. On March 21, 2025, Malaysia Airlines placed its biggest Boeing order in 10 years for 737 MAX jets. The deal came with tax breaks, fast-track permits for a Boeing maintenance hub in Selangor, and skilled workers who earn a third of what South Carolina techs make. Then there's India. Even before the tariff wars reignited, Boeing had joined forces with Tata in Hyderabad to produce 737 vertical fins. The factory shipped its first part in February 2023 and is now pushing 10 units a month, originally a task planned for Wichita. India's draw? Predictable rules, low energy costs, and a state government that builds infrastructure right to Boeing's doorstep. Critics call this abandonment. Boeing sees it as survival. Every global site acts as backup. If one country blocks orders, another stays open. Each new investment builds goodwill, encouraging loyalty from customers like Lufthansa or Air Canada. This isn't about ditching America. It's about spreading risk in a world where slogans don't pay the bills. Predictable trade policy is now more valuable than made in USA. So, do tariffs really help American industry, or do they push companies away? Boeing's answer is already in motion. On November 11, 2024, more layoffs hit Everett, North Charleston, and St. Louis, well before a single job was saved by tariffs. Meanwhile, Airbus gained ground. As China banned Boeing jets, Airbus snapped up the orders. Every Airbus deal is one less aircraft built in America, and more reason for nations to develop their own supply chains. With United States policy shifting unpredictably, Boeing is planting roots elsewhere. In late May 2025, it poured millions into Canada's green fuel sector. Why? Ottawa gave Boeing what Washington wouldn't: reliable rules and strong support. When China slammed the door, Airbus stepped in. Thousands of United States workers lost their jobs. Boeing, once the symbol of American manufacturing, now places its long-term bets outside the United States. This doesn't strengthen American industry, it hollows it out. Boeing might be the first major company forced to choose between loyalty and survival, but it won't be the last. When staying put costs more than leaving, even iconic firms move on. This is the unintended result of modern protectionism. Policies that promise jobs but end up driving companies out. Every new shutdown weakens the very industries these rules were supposed to protect. And it's not just aerospace. Even top American retailers are taking hits, not from Beijing, but from U.S. policies. Tariffs meant to shield the economy are crushing margins, clearing out shelves, and forcing store closures. Walmart has warned of price hikes. Target is bracing for sticker shock. Home Depot says key products may vanish. The red, white, and blue price tag is getting harder to afford. So what have we learned? First, when tariffs rise, prices spike and consumers notice. Second, supply chains don't wait. They shift to more stable places. Third, retail job cuts ripple out, hurting truckers, farmers, and factory towns. Where does this end? Maybe Congress finds a fix. Maybe businesses just move on. But one thing's certain, if this tariff game keeps going, the next company to pull back won't be a surprise. It'll just feel like the new normal. So, is this economic pain worth it for a promise that never arrives? Or are we bleeding slowly in ways we can't afford? Ask Boeing. Its assembly lines already answered, and they're not on U.S. soil anymore.